So today's objective is the same as yesterday. We are multiplying exponential expressions and simplifying completely. So for the first example, we have 2x to the negative second, y to the negative 3, over 4x to the fourth, y cubed, all to the negative second power, times 3x to the negative fourth, y cubed, over 4x to the negative first, y squared, all squared. So we start off with the first set of fractions, and we have 2 to the negative second, x to the fourth, y to the sixth, over 4 to the negative second, x to the negative 8, y to the negative 6. Then we have 3 to the second, x to the negative 8th, y to the 6th, over 4 squared, x to the negative second, y to the fourth. Now we start to simplify. Since our 2 is to the negative second power, it gets moved down to the bottom and then becomes a positive. Our x is already to a positive 4, so it stays on top. As is our y, it's positive to the 6th, so it stays on top. Now we move down to the bottom and we have 4 to the negative second. Since it's to the negative, it gets moved to the top and becomes 4 squared. The x is to the negative 8th, so since it's negative, it gets moved to the top, becomes x to the 8th. And the y to the 6th is also on the bottom, and it is negative, so it gets moved to the top. It becomes y to the 6th. Times 3 squared is a positive, so it stays on top. X is to the negative 8th, so it gets moved down to the bottom and becomes positive 8. Y is to the positive 6, so it stays on top. Over 4 squared is positive. X to the negative 2 is negative, so it gets moved to the top and becomes positive. And your y to the fourth is positive, so it stays on the bottom. And now we simplify even more, and we get 16. And now we add the exponents for 4 and 8, becomes x to the 12th. And y to the 6th times y to the 6th becomes y to the 12th. Times 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16. There are 6 y's on top and 4 y's on bottom, so that means that there are 2 more y's on top than there are on bottom, so it becomes y squared. And for our x's, there are 8 more. There are 8 on the bottom and 2 on the top, so that means there are 6 more on the bottom. So now we start. We also have a 4 on the bottom. So now we look to simplify either across or vertically. I'm going to go ahead and go across. 16 here and 16 here will end up canceling out. So you're going to be left with 9 over 4. You have x to the 12th on top and y to the 14th on top. And on bottom you have x to the 6th. So this simplifies to 9 over 4. There are 12 x's on top and 6 on the bottom, so that means that there are 6 more on top. And there are only y's on the top, so they stay on the top. So your answer should be 9x to the 6th, y to the 14th over 4. So we have 2x to the negative second, y cubed, over 3x cubed, y to the 5th, all squared, times 4x to the negative second, y to the 5th, over 3x cubed, y to the negative second, all to the negative first. So we start by putting everything in the first one to the second power. It becomes 2 squared x to the negative 4, y to the 6th, over 3 squared x to the 6th, y to the 10th. Okay, so we continue on. Now everything in this one gets multiplied to the negative first power. So 4 to the negative 1, x squared, y to the negative 5, over 3 to the negative 1, x to the negative 3, and y squared. So now we start to simplify. 2 squared is already to the positive power, so it becomes 4. X to the negative 4 gets moved to the bottom, and the 4 becomes positive. The y to the 6 is already positive. Now we move down to the bottom, and we have 3 squared, which is 9. X to the 6 is positive, so it stays on the bottom. And y to the 10th is also positive, so it stays on the bottom. Okay, now we move to the second set of parentheses. We have 4 to the negative first, so it moves down to the bottom and just becomes 4, because 4 to the first power is 4. X squared stays on top. The y to the negative fifth gets moved to the bottom and becomes positive. Now we take the bottom part, 3 to the negative first becomes 3 to the first on top, which is just 3. X to the negative 3 becomes x cubed on top. And on the bottom, y squared stays there because it's already to the positive power. So now we continue to reduce and simplify. We can go ahead and get rid of this 4. If you cross multiply, those would cancel out. And also, 3 over 9 is equal to 1 over 3. So the 3 and the 9 cancel. Now we have y to the 6th over y to the 10th. There are 4 more y's on bottom than there are on top. And there are also 10 x's in the bottom. So we have 1 over x to the 10th times y to the 4th times, now we simplify the second part, and that becomes x to the 5th over y to the 7th. So now we just multiply the top, and we get x to the 5th over x to the 10th. Oh, and can't forget our 3. X to the 10th, y to the 11th, which simplifies to, there are 10 x's on the bottom and 5 on top, so that means there's 5 more on the bottom, leaving just a 1 on top. 3 y to the 11th. So your final answer would be 1 over 3x to the 5th, y to the 11th. So we start out with 5 to the negative 3, x to the negative 9, y to the negative 12, over 2 to the negative 3, x to the negative 15, y to the negative 6. Continue on. So now we have 4 to the negative 2nd, x to the 6th, y to the negative 2nd, over 5 to the negative 2nd, x to the 4th, y to the 6th. So now we start to simplify. We have 5 to the negative 3 gets put down to the bottom and becomes 5 cubed. X to the negative 9 also gets moved to the bottom and becomes positive. And y to the negative 12th also gets moved to the bottom and becomes y to the 12th. So now we have 2 to the negative 3 becomes 2 to the 3rd on top. X to the negative 15 gets moved to the top and becomes x to the 15th. And y to the negative 6 also gets moved to the top and becomes y to the 6th. Times 4 to the negative 2nd gets moved to the bottom and becomes 4 squared. X to the 6th stays on top. And y to the negative 2nd moves to the bottom and becomes y squared. Over. Now we have 5 to the negative 2nd gets moved to the top and becomes 5 squared. X to the 4th is already positive. And y to the 6th is also positive, so the exponent stays on the bottom. Now we continue to simplify. So we have 8. And there are 15 x's on top and 9 x's on the bottom, so that means there's 6 more x's on top than there are on the bottom. And our y's, there are 12 on bottom and 6 on top, so that means there are 6 more on the bottom, so those stay on the bottom, and 5 cubed is 125. Times 5 squared is 25. There are 6 x's on top and there are 4 x's on the bottom, so there are 2 more x's on top. Now for our bottom part, we have 4 squared is 16 and there are 8 y's on the bottom. Okay, so if we cross multiplied or cross reduced, we have 25 here and 125 here. 25 goes into 125 5 times, And 8 and 16, 8 goes into 16 two times. So the 8 and the 25 end up canceling out. So you're left with 6 x's on top times 2 x's on top, which gives you 8 x's on top, over 5 times 2 is 10. And there are 6 x's, or 6 y's, I'm sorry, and 8 y's, so it becomes y to the 14th.